everyone. Good evening. How are you? It is Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. I can't believe it. We're headed into the 4th of July weekend already. So, yeah, strange 4th of July this year, right? Hi, everybody. So happy you're all with me. Look at these gorgeous flowers behind me, my friends. This is from fabulous artist Arlene Joseph. Thank you so much, Arlene. They smell amazing. They are gorgeous. So happy. Nothing's like receiving flowers from a friend. It's just one of the true joys in life. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So everybody, we are continuing with Rosie Lee Tompkins from our review, Roberta Smith's review from the New York Times. I just want to pick up where we left off last night. It was so exciting to see her work. I love this picture of her. I really love this picture. I just think it's fabulous. And I want to show you also, before we move on, is I'm going to show you the slideshow again while I'm reading more, but I also want to show you some other images, just kind of slow it down so you have some time to think about it. This was the home of Eli, the man who kind of championed her, and all of her work was just everywhere in his space. Yeah. So let's go back to, I want to look at, I want to look also before we go too far. I want to show you these two quilts because one is the quilt. Hey, Jamie, how are you? Hey, Sam, how are you? Good to see you. The quilt on the left is Rosie Lee Tompkins. The quilt on the right is Gee's Bend, Alabama. And I tried to pick the quilts that are kind of analogous to each other, and certainly in color, these are. I just really love the way they work together, and that we see that there is a long history in this country of quilt making by women, by African American women, improvisational quilt making that is most definitely so important to be included in the canon of art history. Once again, here's a quilt on the right from Rosie Lee done in denim, and the quilt on the left are from the women of Gee's Bend. Hey, Kip, how are you? Great to see you here. Yeah, I just love these. Just love these. Here's a phenomenal quilt. I'm going to hold us on this for a second as I read some more about her, because she kind of broke away from her own way of quilt making and starts adding other things into it. Yeah. So let me see where we left off. Anybody remember where we left off? Improvisation and African American quilt making. I just love that. I think I left off right here, where Roberta Smith says, "Though I never met Tompkins, her quilts became stuck in my mind, sometimes at the forefront, sometimes in a corner. I mentioned her work in my writing when I could. Initially, she seemed to belong to the first rank of outsider artists who began reshaping an American art canon. I may have read this already. But the self-taught or outsider labels were inaccurate for quilters. Effie Mae Martin, her name by birth, had grown up as her mother's apprentice in a kind of atelier, a small town full of female friends and relatives who quilted, the older one showing and telling the younger one how it's done." This is really important because this is what I really learned from the women of Gee's Bend that becomes so important to all of this, and that is the sharing, that this idea of women's work or as women's groups and the coming together. So the one on the left are the women of Gee's Bend, Alabama, and it reminds me so much of this quilt on the right that is Effie Mae's, and this coming together in this community of people who are there to create, both for the joy of creating, of the creative process, but certainly in terms of Gee's Bend, Alabama, needing warmth, needing to make quilts and blankets and such. And then the camaraderie that goes along with that, and the comfort, and then the passing down from generation to generation, which is so incredibly important. Very, very important, especially in African American histories, where you have so much of the history that's been obliterated and unfortunately hasn't been written down because the enslaved people were not taught how to read and write. So the stories are passed down through storytelling. Yeah. Who else do we have? Is my mother here? Okay. So let's continue on. I love this review of Roberta's. Okay, so sorry, one second. She reminded me of George Orr, the unparalleled. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. She said, more and more I saw her as a great American artist. No qualifier needed. Not great American quilter, not great American woman artist, not great American African American woman artist. No, great American artist. Yay. Hi, Mom. How are you? Yay. Good to see you. Okay. She reminded me of George Orr, the unparalleled turn-of-the-century potter from Biloxi, Mississippi, his work was rediscovered in the early 70s. Orr's precariously thin-walled vessels, unlikely shapes, and inspired glazing shared a kind of bravado with Tompkins' works. They both possessed an extraordinary skill and idiosyncratic abandon that creates a new sense of the possibilities of the hand, visual wit, and beauty in any medium. How much do you love that? Visual wit. I love that. And the possibilities of the hand. I hear Jamie Bellet's voice in my head going, possibilities of the hand, right? Yeah, extraordinary. As with Orr, Tompkins' work triggered a kind of joy at first encounter. You could hear it in the reviews of the 2002 Whitney Biennial, which Mr. Rinder organized during his stint there as curator of contemporary art, Rinder, I should say. He put 3 of her quilts in the show, one of which the Whitney acquired. As a final decade, that was nearly vertical trajectory, that was a vertical trajectory, hurtling toward art world fame. Rosie Lee Tompkins died suddenly at 70. And remember one of my little students was on yesterday, Eleanor Boo Boo. She asked if she was still alive. She died at 70. Hello, Leslie. How are you? So great to see you here. In December 2006 in her home. So sad. At 70. To me, like she was just beginning life, right? Then in 2013, Eli began to leave her urgent phone messages. You have to come out here. I need help. His thin, reedy voice said. He had received a diagnosis of dementia and was worried about what would become of his collection, which he wanted to keep intact. It was overflowing, not only in his house, but also a small climate-controlled annex he had built behind it. So here you see his dining room. I posted that picture. Sad. Roberta continues, she says, I visited him that fall to be stunned all over again when Eli and Jenny Hirth, his exemplary friend, assistant, fellow quilt lover, and, after 2011, most constant caregiver, unveiled a succession of Tompkins velvets, clipping them to the molding above the double doors between his living room and dining rooms. I listened as Eli spoke about Tompkins, her life and work, and also his. Eli was not shy about his considerable brilliance, and nor should he be. Yeah, right, Jamie? Visual wit? Yeah, you like that? Yeah, it's true. Wedging myself into the narrow gaps between the shelves of folded quilts in the annex, I got an inkling of how much I'd seen him. I'm sorry, guys, I'm yawning. I've been talking a lot today. And the day when I'm talking a lot, I tend to start yawning. With this visit, I joined a scattered group of individuals who had been seduced by Eli's dedication, but mainly by his collection, and were now concerned for its fate. In addition to Mr. Rinder and Miss Hirth, it included Elsa Longhauser, then director of Santa Monica Museum of Art, recently renamed the Institute of Contemporary Art of Los Angeles. No one quite knew the actual size of his holdings. Eli provided only the vaguest of numbers when asked, but it seemed immense, judging from the 2 and 3 foot stacks of quilts that had been navigated to get through his darkened living room. I want to be in this living room. We are talking about that today in a workshop that I had about, there's nothing like being in an artist studio or seeing an artist studio over Zoom, or someone like Eli who was collecting artwork just piled floor to ceiling. It's fantastic. I saw Eli once more in 2016 when I went to Berkeley to review the inauguration of the museum's new building. His dementia was much further along, but he smiled. I'm so sorry, friends. Just yawning a lot because I've been talking all day. And I'm losing my voice. Okay. He smiled as Miss Hirth introduced me to another dimension of Tompkins' creativity. The words and numbers, I want to show you this, because this is part of, I think, is extraordinary. The words and numbers that she awkwardly whip-stitched to her quilts, adding a layer of personal meaning in a spidery script that sometimes resembled graffiti done with rapidograph. I'm not sure I even know what rapidograph is. Maybe Jamie does. She signed nearly everything with her real name, Effie, or some combination of Effie Mae Martin Howard, and often added her nearly palindromic date of birth, 9/6/36, or the birth dates of her sons, her parents, and other relatives she wanted to honor. Gorgeous. Sometimes the embroidery reflected her daily Bible reading, including the Gospels, as did her addition of applique crosses. Occasionally, she stitched the addresses and places she had lived and Ellie's home. The information suggested talismanic properties, perhaps prayers. She also said they were meant to improve the relationships between the people evoked by the numbers. I find that fascinating. In her 3 6s quilt, inspired by the 6s and the birth dates of 3 family members, she acknowledged them by limiting her palette to 3 colors, orange, yellow, and purple. I think I have that one in the slideshow. Let me just see if I have it here for you, which is really fascinating. She really takes, I'm going to go back to the slideshow for you now from yesterday. She really, it's really fascinating that all the aspects of her life end up in the quilts, right? In such an improvisational way, as Roberta Smith has called her work. Let's see, wait, Charles has a question. What style would you call this work? Improvisational quilt making. That's all I could come up with. Oh, a rapidograph is an old school drafting and graphics pen. See, I knew you would know that. Yeah, thank you. Oh, isn't that great, Kip? That's right, Kip. We have discussed this, the quilt. You have a quilt buried, right? That I want you to pull out. And yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, let's continue our story here because it's just really important American history. Eli died on March 6, 2018, at age 82 in an assisted living home. To raise money for his care, Miss Hirth oversaw multiple yard sales for the contents of his home, except the quilts. The question of their destiny hung uneasily in the air. Yeah. Then, several months later, came the amazing news. Eli had bequeathed his entire quilt collection to the Berkeley Art Museum, a tribute to the early advocacy of Mr. Rinder. The final count of Eli Leon's bequest was 3,100 quilts by over 400 artists. What a beautiful man. Tompkins, represented by more than 680 quilts, quilt tops, appliques, clothing, and objects is undoubtedly the star. Laverne Brackens, a well-known fourth-generation quilter in Texas, runs a close second with about 300 quilts in the collection. While fraught with obligations regarding care, storage, display, and access to few museums, large or small, would take on, the bequest automatically transforms the Berkeley Museum and its parent institution, the University of California, Berkeley, into an unparalleled center for the study of African American quilts. Interest and support are coming forth. The museum has already received a $500,000 grant from the Luce Foundation for a follow-up survey on Eli's entire gift in 2022, which should be every bit as surprising as this one. Extraordinary, right? Extraordinary. Yes, Kip, right? Actually, that's the weaving from the cotton farm, right? Yeah, amazing. On the plane out of San Francisco in February, I read the exhibition catalog cover to cover. The organizers' excellent essays included Mr. Rinder's vividly relating Tompkins' use of improvisation to the innovations of Ornette Coleman and his no-hole-barred free jazz sensibility. Also his notes that she was an opera fan who listened to disco while doing her work. Right. What a story, right, Jamie? I love this because it speaks so much to high and low, right? The notion of that canon that's been in place for so long, and then the canon that's now, the canon of art history, and the canon of art history now that's blown away, that's opened up. The notion that the high art of classical and opera, and then she's listening to disco. It's American culture, right? It's American life. It's amazing. Ms. Yao provides the foundational account of Tompkins' life, her working methods, and the role of family ties and religion. And Horace D. Ballard, a former divinity student who is now a curator and art historian at Williams College, fantastic, and its museum, writes that Tompkins lived in service of a higher calling, trying her efforts to sacred music, text, and architecture, tying her efforts. But even they couldn't prepare me for the visual force of the 62 quilts and 5 assemblage-like memory jugs dating from the 1970s to 2004. Spread out in the museum's skylighted galleries, the work's beauty is more insistent than ever. Because of Tompkins' improvisation, a close look doesn't reveal refinement or rote technique, skill for skill's sake. It shows small individual adjustments made and liberties taken, almost granular expressions of granular expressions of imagination and freedom. In addition, the fabrics, variously elegant, everyday, and airsats, bring a lot with them, not just color and texture, but also manufacturing techniques and social connotations. Do you think that polyester double knit might look cheap used in a quilt? Think again. Cotton flannel and beaded and sequined silk crepe might not be a winning combination. Likewise, such physical realism is all but impossible to achieve with paint. Isn't it stunning? The measure of Tompkins' ambition is that she preferred to concentrate on the free/jazz aspect of her work, piecing the quilt tops. Other women finished the quilts by adding a layer of wadding and the back, a standard practice. So also kind of this notion of sharing, right? Most of the pieces in the show were quilted by Irene Bankhead, whose work Eli also collected. The show begins by demonstrating Tompkins' unusual range and versatility, juxtaposing quilts in smoldering velvets with a medley of found denims, an homage to her grandfather and other farmers in her family. A remarkable, we forget in America that denim has to do with farming. Denim, these days, well, not these days, but for so long, once it was popularized as jeans, and every day the jeans that we wear, and then Ralph Lauren taking it to another level, we forgot that is about a community and farming, yeah. A remarkable early quilt from the 1970s is pieced almost entirely of blocks of found fabric embroidered with flowers, old and new, machine and handmade. They bow to an ancient craft, and at the quilt's center, a spare image of a risen Christ blessing. I have that piece. I want to show it to you. I have it here. I'm going to just make it larger so that you can really see it, because I found this one remarkable too. I'm going to turn off the G's Bend collection. Okay, let me just show you that one as you're going through. Right. Above and to the right, a circle of twisted bands and leaves suggest both a crown of thorns and a laurel wreath. Was Tompkins aware of this possible reading? Perhaps, but the main point is that her work is open to the viewer's response and interpretation. And I would like to add to that, it's open because she encompasses so much of a wider universality, right? I mean, it's not just about being a woman artist or an African-American woman artist or born in a certain century. There's a universality to all of this, yeah. As an artist, Tompkins may have taken improvisation further than other quilters. She all but abandoned pattern for an inspired randomness with an emphasis on serial disruptions that constantly divert or startle the eye, like the badge of a California prison guard sewn to an otherwise conventional crazy quilt. I'm not sure if I have that one, but yeah, I know that there was, I'll show you this one while we're reading that. Okay. Another narrative quilt is more like a wall hanging or maybe a street mural, pieced with large fragments of black and white fabric and t-shirt print, printed with images of African-American athletes and political leaders. It reminds me of Emma Amos. Rows of crosses made from men's ties evoke the pressure of succeeding while black in America. You saw that one. Her big velvet quilts, the exalted heart of the show, that's one you're looking at, are most often disrupted by dramatic shifts in color and scale. In one, several blocks of stark black and white triangles break through an expanse of rich colors like icebergs in a dark sea. The opposite corner features a distinctive Tompkins advice, a small framed area composed of tiny squares that create a quilt within a quilt, which reads as a witty self-reference to the quilting process and pulls us into the intimacy of making. I want to show you, I have one that I pulled like that because I thought it was fascinating. Let me see if give me 1 second. Yeah, I agree with you, Charles. That's why it's real, this piece here. It's so important now more than ever that we are looking at art and understanding that if we look at art, we will see the culture of people. We will see that cross-cultural exchange. We will understand each other better, so much better. You cannot look at this and not see yourself and not see America and see the best of what it is, right? One of Tompkins' most spectacular velvets is edged with these framed mini quilts, that's this, which surround an enormous field of blue velvets that create a kind of Van Gogh night sky. They can read as small painted side panels of an altarpiece. Some feature abutting triangles that suggest desert landscapes and pyramids, perhaps a flight into Egypt. In a catalog, Mr. Ballard resonantly likens the fields of blue to the vault of the cathedral and the borders of the clear story window. Now that's where I live, right? I mean, that's where I live. That is brilliant. I'm telling you, there are some curators, great curators are just brilliant the way they see things, and art historians and people that look at a lot of art. When you can make those connections, it's a lot of what I teach my students, that just continue to look and make these connections. It goes and expands throughout your entire life. It's not just the looking at art, it's then making connections through life. We'll all be happier and much more, well, number one, happier, and number two, less critical of each other, because we'll look for these beautiful connections. There can't be an America without this kind of work. And if we saw this, as you're saying, Charles, if more people saw this, they would come to realize that too. I completely agree. And I'm just so grateful. First of all, I'm grateful to be wrong about holding on to the canon for so long, and that this whole canon is being blown open now, so that there is work like us for us to truly see what art is in America and American artists in a new way. She goes on to say there are many museum exhibitions on lockdown in the United States right now. They closed in one world and will reopen in a very different one. She's right. Because we closed during COVID, but we're going to reopen with a hashtag with really understanding Black Lives Matter and the pulling down of these monuments. They closed in one world, reopen in a very different one, and the relevance of Rosie Lee Tompkins, a retrospective, has only expanded in the hiatus. The sheer joy of her best quilts cannot be overstated. They come at us with the force and sophistication of so-called high art, but are more democratic without any intimidation factor. And truly, who created the intimidation factor? Those of us who are part of the canon of art, right? We created the intimidation factor. And I, in my work, tried to go a long way of, my hashtag making art accessible. But I still held to that notion of the canon. So this is thrilling for me to see that I didn't, in my work, need to go further as well. Her work is simply further evidence of the towering African American achievements that permeate the culture of this country. A deeper understanding and knowledge of these, especially where art is concerned, must be part of the necessary rectification and healing that America faces. Tompkins seems to have been an artist of singular greatness, but who knows what further revelations, including the upcoming survey of the Eli Leon bequest, are in store. The field of improvisational quilting by African American women is not small, but beyond the great quilters of Gee's Bend, Alabama, and a few others, their work is not widely known. Rosie Lee Tompkins' version of what Eli Leon called flexible patterning, there's your answer, Charles, flexible patterning, may have been more extreme than anyone else's, or perhaps not. It would be gratifying to learn that she did not act alone. I can assure you that she didn't, because no one acts in a vacuum. That Gee's Bend, the phenomenal women of Gee's Bend are there, and Rosie Lee was there, and there are more. There most definitely. And it is up to us, curators alike, to go out and find them now that we have busted open that canon, and do so with a level of confidence. A lot of times what people kept to the, and not to let myself off the hook, but when I first started showing Chinese contemporary art, I was laughed out of the canon. They told me, this is, Jamie, I'm reading from last week's New York Times. They told me no one will ever, it will mean nothing in the scope of the art world. It'll mean nothing at that time. When I first started showing Emma Amos, African-American woman whose work found a lot of influence in quilting, right? Was influenced greatly by quilting in 1990. I'm thinking about when I was holding my son, William. He was born in 98. I started showing Emma, I think, in 96. I was told, no, never going to happen. So, yeah, it's such a great thing to see Roberta Smith writing about this. An art professor of mine, Richard Kalina, who shows with Lenin Weinberg Gallery, wrote about the women of Gee's Bend for Art in America. And he's a very erudite guy and a hardcore canonist. That's what I'm going to call him. And through his beautiful article, waxing poetic about the ladies of Gee's Bend, but then questions, are they really a part of the canon of art history? Which kind of sickened me. But anyway, yeah, I agree with you, Charles. Jamie, the canon has been revised to address our current world more accurately, and it needed to be. And if the canon of art history can change, then so can we, right? Yeah. Yes, this is Jerry's better half, Jamie, and even Jerry would say that. His much better half. Yeah, phenomenal work. So as we enter into the 4th of July weekend, this makes me so happy. Look at that piece right there. It's like stained glass, right? So happy. And the first place I want to go after lockdown is Berkeley. And Mom, I hope you'll come with us because this is going till December. I don't know if it's traveling after that. I want to find out. Yeah. And I must see this show. So my friends, thank you so much for joining me this evening. This has been so great, so uplifting. Look at my gorgeous flowers I see in the background here too. So I'm looking at this beautiful work. And the smell of them, like I started this, I was like sitting down here. All of a sudden I'm smelling Arlene's flowers so beautifully. And I sat up and I stopped yawning, yeah? All right, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow night. We'll do something to kick off July 4th. Yeah, let's do that. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much always for joining me. It's my honor and pleasure to always be here on smART stART with all of you. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.